Hi everyone, Amar and I are working on Nexavision. To do this, we're trying to become the next generation data provider by providing frame-by-frame data from any basketball game that has access to a broadcast. Before I go into our product, I want to talk about the status quo of our offerings. Next slide. So if you want frame-by-frame tracking right now, you have three solutions. The first of these is manual. You hire someone to sit courtside at a game. They tag the relative location of things. This is something that a data provider like SportsRadar is doing. The second is you have a solution like Hawkeye. You install specialized hardware around an arena and use a pre-configured system of cameras to get this frame-by-frame data. The third approach is one involving hardware. This is something like what ShotTracker does, where you outfit every player with specialized technology that can give you the data that you want. But the status quo of data availability runs into three issues. First of all, it's incredibly inaccessible. For the vast majority of basketball stadiums, think NCAA, AAU, or other types of games, that hardware isn't going to come pre-configured and it's expensive to install. That brings us to the second issue, the cost. It's expensive to get this hardware or software installed with specialized cameras, and it's even more expensive to hire someone to sit courtside at every single game and record the events. And third, that means the status quo of data is incomplete. Sportsbooks still generate their odds off things like play-by-play data, but there is entire dimensionality of data that is lost when you don't look at the frame-by-frame analysis.
Knowing these issues, me and Arham came together at the Arena X Sports Tech Challenge, which was a hackathon in San Francisco hosted by the Warriors. There, we built the MVP of our product now, which is player tracking using broadcast video. So what did we make? Essentially, we built an engine that is able to ingest broadcast video and generate precise player tracking and identification data. That means taking nothing but just the broadcast video, we're able to precisely identify where the players are at, who the players are, what team they're on, and what the players are doing. Our system is robust to occlusions, to moving camera angles, and even low video qualities. That means we can ingest videos for any sort of league, the NBA, NCAA, WNBA, even high school basketball, although we are focusing on the NCAA and NBA for now. What does this mean? We don't need to install any sort of hardware. We don't need to install any sort of set of multiple cameras. With only a single camera angle, we're able to generate all of this data with precise XY coordinates. Not only that, we have another layer built on top of that, which is our suite of advanced analytics. We built this analytic called expected possession value, which is very much inspired from expected goal in soccer. This means that we're calculating the probability of scoring at any given point. Not only that, we could also simulate passes and see what the probability of scoring is for all the teammates on the court. That means we can see when passing opportunities are optimal, when players are making mistakes, and whether or not they should have taken those takes or shots they're doing in the game. We're also calculating the offensive threat of players. Right? Does the player have gravity? Are they pulling in defenders towards them? Are they creating opportunities for their teammates just by their position on the court? Those are all things that we can now quantify through our metrics. We also do the inverse. We call it EPV suppression, but it's also defensive impact. How are the defenders doing? Are they shutting down the team's offenses? Right? How well is the defense playing? Is a man-to-man or zone defense better? Right? Those are all things we can see in the data. And finally, we could also look at the player fatigue. Right? Are players getting tired throughout a game? Should a player be subbed in or out? How is player usage? Those are all things that we help make decisions on. And this is just scratching the surface of some of the analytics that we create. So with that, our core offering is data for teams. We build dashboards for both NBA and NCAA teams. We're giving them data on how their games have went, how their players are performing, what mistakes were made. We have scouting reports and also how other players' offenses are playing around, how their defenses are going, all that sort of stuff. Valuable information for teams to make game-critical decisions.
So one of the key insights of this conference has been that the future of fan engagement largely revolves around sports betting, which is growing at an exponential rate. But sports betting runs into some bottlenecks with the data. Right now, there isn't just enough data to list some particularly interesting player props that fans want, and there's no source of ground truth for other types of betting markets that have come up in Europe in sports like football. That's where Nexavision comes in and changes the game. First of all, the granularity of frame-by-frame tracking data as a source of ground truth lets sportsbooks price odds on new markets. Think continuous player props. Now, every sports betting degenerate can make literally any parlay that they want, something that has a track record of captivating audiences. But the second and more exciting part of this, in my opinion, is listing new types of markets. Imagine a market on what Steph Curry's deepest three is going to be, on how many defenders are going to be on Jokic tonight, and the max speed Klay Thompson is going to reach in the game. These are all markets that are already listed in Europe for sports like football. The issue for basketball has been there's no source of ground truth because there is no vision tracking based off broadcast, and the NBA refuses to license out their Hawkeye data to sports betting providers. Thus, not only do we improve the status quo of odds, we also enable literally a paradigm shift in what kinds of markets these books can list. And that brings us to the third and most ambitious goal, the future of broadcasting. One concern in this conference has been that long-form sports broadcasting is cannibalizing some of its market share to short-form content. That might be because casual fans want something that's already analyzed and digestible. And that's where we can step in. Over here you see an overlay that looks just like something out of 2K, one of our favorite games. With a 3 times compute cluster of the current size, we can start analyzing these games in real time. What that means is that we can overlay players with helpful statistics that make it easier for fans to analyze the game. We can also recognize what kinds of plays happen in real time, and as such, generate the real-time highlight clips that companies like Overtime and Barstool have gotten so much traction doing. What we hope to do with this when we make our metrics real time is allow the next generation of sports fans that are currently casual but trying to get into the game to have an easier time overcoming those barriers to entry.
So where are we at today? We're a new company. We were founded 6 months ago. So over the last 6 months, we were perfecting our engine and making sure that our tracking is as precise as possible. Today, we're proud to announce that with any given video, we can precisely track all the players and calculate all the events and generate all the analytics. We're transitioning into phase 2, which is providing our data to different teams. We're working with both the NBA and NCAA, mainly with teams in the Bay because we're located out of San Francisco, but we started working with teams like Santa Clara and of course the Warriors, and we have more NBA teams in the pipeline as well. At the same time, we began to license out our data to different sportsbook. We've been in early conversations, sending out data samples, and over the next few months, we're hoping to become a tier 1 data provider for different odds makers and books. Finally, at the end of this year, we hope to break into the real-time market. Our software can produce real-time analytics, and near the end of the year, we hope to generate new lines for books and create new events and new features for books to sell to their customers. Not only that, we hope to also sell to broadcasts. Like Arham was saying, we could generate very nice animations and also track the players in real time, allowing for a myriad of new opportunities for broadcast and media. Thank you for listening. We'll open the floor for any questions.
Thank you. Great presentation. You mentioned several different potential customers and several different commercialization opportunities. So for our benefit, if you had to pick ideal target customer and ideal commercialization model, which would you pick?
Right, I can take this one. So some numbers for reference. The size of the broadcast market right now for NBA is roughly $9.3 billion. The size of the betting market was recently $9.6 billion, but that's growing at the CAGR of 15%. And I think earlier today, some of the micro betting numbers were a $1.5 to $2 billion market growing at a CAGR of like 25%. So I think our most promising target audience is sports betting. The data is already good enough to use for that, so we can start shipping to customers tomorrow. And that anchors to the largest market growing at the fastest rate.
This is great, guys, and thank you for the clear explanation. So I understand it right, you can overlay on any broadcast.
Yeah.
And be able to pull that information. It's very scalable, but have you looked into or have you run into any issues with intellectual property of broadcasters and utilizing that information?
Yeah, so that depends on the types of offerings we're catering to. On the team side, if we're generating analytics a la carte for something like a coach that wants to analyze their own games or a scout that wants to analyze high school games, they bring the video to us, so we assume that they have some level of IP over it. And then on the other side of sports betting, what we've been doing in the status quo is just pulling over broadcast, and I definitely have to research more about the IP regarding data pipelines there.
Yeah. And again, with broadcasts, we're a tool. We're not selling any of the media. We're not selling the actual broadcast overlay. We're a tool for broadcasters and medias to include in their own media offerings.
Yeah, no, and I mean, as I said, it's incredibly scalable versus what a Sport Radar is doing, where you just need to ingest one live stream.
Mm-hmm.
I would just make the recommendation that you look into or find protection so that if you are utilizing broadcast, I don't know if an NBA betting partner might not be happy about someone utilizing data from a broadcast with another betting partner, for instance, or you just don't have full control of your data, where the data is coming from, if you're using a public broadcast.
Right. And that's why we've begun to work with teams first, mainly because they have all these rights protected, and we want to make sure we're regulating within the boundaries.
Can you talk a little bit about where you see kind of the risks ahead? I know you mentioned right now the NBA doesn't allow the kind of the Hawkeye data to go more broadly. If they decided to go that way, kind of how would you think about whether that's pivoting or competing against that proposition or anything else that you see?
Again, like we were talking about, there's two layers. One is, of course, generating the tracking data, but that's not all we provide. We have our own set of advanced proprietary analytics, like we're talking about the shot quality, defensive threat. Those are all things that are native to us that we're providing to the teams. And not only that, even if Hawkeye does release the data, there's still leagues that are underserved, like the NCAA. They don't have any viable tracking solutions yet, and all the other leagues that don't have systems like Hawkeye.
Yeah, I'll add too that this works kind of ex post facto. So there will always be games that you want to analyze when you have a broadcast, but you never had hardware sensors involved there. At the rate scouts are going, you might want to be sequencing middle school games to find these 6'2" middle schoolers, and our system works for that. Others, like Hawkeye, won't be installed in those areas.
Got it. And then do you mind talking a little bit about pricing and how you think about pricing for the different customer segments that you're targeting?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, it's largely a la carte with teams, but again, I'll give you something to anchor to. So competing data providers that give play-by-play level data for the NCAA charge $750,000 for one season worth of data. That's just for labeling key plays, like when a shot was made or when a steal happens. There's missing dimensionality in that. And then on top of that, that also doesn't scale to every single game. So for whatever that's worth, that's what we're benchmarking to when we're in these conversations with these teams.
If you could speak a little bit about how, going back to the idea of utilizing data that, someone else might be able to layer over if they could replicate what you're doing. How much of a moat do you have, or how proprietary is what you have versus someone coming in and doing the same thing?
Yeah, I could talk about that. So we come from interesting backgrounds. Our home comes from a quant background. I was a medical AI researcher for 7 years. We happened to meet by chance with the love for basketball. The way we made our software, it was years and years of research over things like cell tracking that we were able to, but a lot of our systems, we have 10 models. Each model has a custom model architecture, custom training data set. It was very difficult to make this and make it working. We've seen a lot of people try and do the same, but we're confident that our engine is the best on the market, and we're not really worried about competitors at this moment.
For betting specifically, obviously latency is really important in terms of how quickly you can kind of analyze for prop betting or whatever the other use cases might be. How are you thinking about that in terms of offering kind of the high latency solution versus having something that's camera installed in menu? Do you foresee any issues there? Is that something you've already solved and thought about?
Yeah.
As for latency, from our testing, we're using multiple GPUs. We have sub 2-second latency. Obviously, that could be improved over time, but granted that we have a live broadcast and we're ingesting the video feed live, anything within sub 2-second latency, whatever offerings that you can make from there, that's something we can provide. Yeah. If there's no further questions, thank you for having us on.
Thanks for the time, y'all.